The one factor that probably hasn't had its due attention is the restrictions we have on foreign investors. It is one topic that we continue to pursue. What we saw in that 2015-16 cycle, when ASIC intervened into the market, they said we're building too many homes in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, particularly apartments. They put in place a series of restrictions. Then state governments doubled down. Then the federal government came in. And just in this last budget, we saw both Queensland and New South Wales introduce additional restrictions on foreign investors. Now, those measures quite possibly revenue negative. That is, they're forcing out so much investment, so much home building activity, they're going to constrain other forms of taxation, income tax, broader stamp duty, not just the punitive restrictions. So to me, it is the easy win. Just why we don't want Japanese or the Americans to build apartments in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane is beyond me.
Tim, can I just pick up on that point? For our listeners' benefit, what they need to understand is usually a developer needs a percentage of pre-sale in terms of the numbers of of properties that they need pre-sold to get the funding to actually get the construction out of the ground. Can you just unpack that a little bit more for our community to understand the importance of that? And if they don't have that level of pre-sale, ultimately we don't get, that additional 75% of supply arriving to meet this housing crisis that we've currently got.
That's right. We're building half the number of apartments now as to what we were in 2015, 2016 timeframe. And part of that is that loss of foreign investors. And at the moment, there are some other problems in the cycle as well. We've seen a rapid increase in material prices, the magnitude of about 35% since the start of the pandemic. Seen labour costs increase that 30 to 35%. We're through both of those cycles now. Material price rises through to June this year were 1.1%. So that's back to well under CPI, back to pre-pandemic volumes. But we have a problem that we can't get anywhere near the volume of apartments commencing construction is what we need to meet underlying demand, and even not back to the level we were doing a decade ago. And that's partly due to that loss of foreign investment. Developers of apartments need, at the moment, probably 80 to 90% pre-sold before they'll get a commencement. We've entered a little bit of an infinite loop cycle where over the past 3 years, every time they sold that volume, they go back to the builder and say, yes, we're ready to start. And the builder would say, the complex is now 10% more expensive. Now we're through that cycle. We're probably still going to wait another 12 months before apartment builders have the confidence to know that they can reach completion within 3 years. High rises are typically a 3-year build. And because of that long build time frame, they have been resistant through this cycle to commence. The second reason they're resistant to commence is there is an enormous amount of other construction projects that they can undertake at the moment where there is one customer, namely government, and they don't have to deal with the complexities of hundreds of homeowners and the like. So that is going to be a problem. There is only one way we can get to that 1.2 million, and that involves a significant increase in apartment construction. Yeah. And it is politically unpopular, but while we have 550,000 new net overseas migrants, and that number is likely to remain very elevated for at least the next 2 years. It's very hard for the government to slow down overseas migration once it's started. And migrants typically reside in apartments in metropolitan cities for the first 1 to 7 years of their time in Australia, and only then do we start to see them flow through to detached housing demand. So from a policy perspective, we have to address that apartment cycle and at the same time continue to build medium and low-rise housing as well. Foreign investors globally, and there's a small number of global banks that build a very large number of homes in every market, and we force them out of the Australian market. And as a consequence now, significant reduction in the volume of apartments commencing construction. But politicians play to a particular dynamic, and it's important to point out that foreign investors cannot buy established homes in Australia. They can only build new. They have been prohibited from buying established homes since 1976. So this argument that foreigners are buying our houses and forcing up house prices is just untrue. They have to seek individual approval from the Federal Treasurer through the Foreign Investment Review Board, and I think there were 1,300 homes purchased last year by foreigners, established homes purchases by foreigners out of 500,000 homes. So it's a very, very small volume. Not able now. That restriction on investors buying established homes exists for a very good reason. We do want housing is a necessity. And we don't want it to be an investment stop for the global share market. That's not desirable. But we definitely want foreign investors building new homes. And it is that constraint on foreigners building new homes that politicians play on that, and they certainly dog whistle to underlying racist attitudes within the community, suggesting that foreigners are taking homes away from Australians. And there can be some truth to that. And certainly overseas migration, international students, the stories there, there has certainly been a significant increase in demand as a consequence of that. As I mentioned before, went from 175,000 net overseas migration to zero, now to 550, and are likely to be sustained well above 350 for some years. But that's not what I'm referring to, and that's not the taxes that we're referring to are taxes on foreign banks, foreign superannuation funds. Those global investors that have probably never been to Australia certainly aren't visa holders because they're not individuals. They are global banks, global superannuation companies that we want to attract into our market to get those apartments over their 50, 80% critical sales that they need in order to get homes to. And it is that acute shortage of investment of any form that is central to getting to that 1.2 million or achieving an adequate supply of housing stock.
So let's simplify that down really to something that our community can grasp really quickly. There might be an opportunity to build 500 apartments in a complex. And let's say those foreign investors want to own 50 or 80 or even, whatever that is. Let's call it 100. Mm-hmm. There's still 400 other properties that will come to market as part of that development. And if those 50 or 100 don't get built, the 500 don't get built. So
That's
that
right.
money doesn't come in here, then ultimately it's a detractor in terms of the overall supply of stock in this country.